And Then There Were None, a book by Agatha Christie. Chapter 1.
Mr. Wargrave went over in his mind all that had appeared in the papers about Soldier Island, which had been an original purchase by an American millionaire. From his pocket, Mr. Justice Wargrave drew out a letter. The handwriting was practically illegible, but words here and there stood out with an unexpected clarity. "Dearest Lawrence, such years since I heard anything of you. Must come to Soldier Island, the most enchanting place. So much to talk over. Old days, communion with nature, bask in sunshine. 12:40 from Paddington. Meet you at Oakbridge." Constance Comington, he reflected to himself, was exactly the sort of woman who would buy an island and surround herself with mystery. Vera Claythorne was in a third-class carriage with 5 other travelers in it. She reread the letter she was given. "I received your name from the Skilled Women's Agency, together with their recommendation. I understand that they know you personally. I should be glad to pay you the salary you ask and shall expect you to take up your duties on August 8th. The train is at 4:20 from Paddington, and you will be met at Oakbridge Station. I enclose 5-pound notes for expenses. Yours truly, Una Nancy Owen." Vera Claythorne, tired by her recent term at school, thought to herself, "Being a games mistress in a third-class school isn't much of a catch. If only I could get a job at some decent school." "Take it or leave it, Captain Lombard," the man said thoughtfully. 100 guineas, eh?" He said it in a casual way, as though 100 guineas was nothing to him. 100 guineas when he was literally down to his last square meal. He had said in the same casual tone, "And you can't give me any further information?" Mr. Isaac Morris had shaken his little bald head very positively. "No, Captain Lombard, the matter rests there. It is understood by my client that your reputation is that of a good man in a tight place. I am empowered to hand you 100 guineas, in return for which you will travel to Sticklehaven, Devon. The nearest station is Oakbridge. You will be met there in motor to Sticklehaven, where a motor launch will convey you to Soldier Island. There you will hold yourself at the disposal of my client." Lombard said abruptly, "For how long?" "Not longer than a week at most." Fingering his small mustache, Captain Lombard said, "You understand I can't take anything illegal." He had darted a very sharp glance at the others as he had spoken. There had been a very fake smile on the thick, Semitic lips of Mr. Morris, as he answered gravely, "If anything illegal is proposed, you will, of course, be at perfect liberty to withdraw." Lombard's lips parted in a grin. "Dear Miss Brent, I do hope you remember me. We were together at Belhaven Guest House in August some years ago, and we seem to have so much in common. I'm starting a guest house of my own on an island off the coast of Devon. I think there is really an opening for a place where there is good plain cooking and a nice old-fashioned type of person. None of this nudity and gramophones half the night. I shall be very glad if you could see your way spending your summer holiday on Soldier Island, quite free, as my guest. Would early in August suit you? Perhaps the 8th? Yours sincerely, UN." What was the name? The signature was rather difficult to read. Emily Brent thought impatiently. So many write their signatures quite illegibly. Soldier Island. There had been a thing in the paper about Soldier Island. Something about a film star, or was it an American millionaire? Of course those places went very cheap. Islands didn't suit everybody. They thought the idea was romantic, but when they came to live there, they realized the disadvantages, and were only too glad to sell. Emily Brent thought to herself, "I shall be getting a free holiday at any rate." When her income so much reduced, and so many dividends not being paid, that was indeed something to take into consideration. If only she could remember a little more about Mrs. or was it Miss Oliver? General MacArthur looked out of the carriage window. The train was just coming into Exeter when he had to change. Damnable, these slow branch line trains. This place Soldier Island was really no distance at all as the crow flies. This Soldier Island now, he'd be interested to see it. A lot of gossip flying about. Looked as though there might be something in the rumor that the Admiralty or the War Office or the Air Force had gotten a hold of it. Exeter. And an hour to wait. And he didn't want to wait. He wanted to get on. Tony Marston, roaring into the mirror, thought to himself, "The amount of cars crawling around the roads is frightful. Always something blocking your way, and they will not drive in the middle of the road. Pretty hopeless driving in England anyway. Not like France, where you could really let it out." Coming out of the hotel, He stretched himself, yawned, looked up at the blue sky, and climbed into the Dalmain. Several young women looked at him admiringly. His 6 feet of well-proportioned body, his crisp hair, tan face, and intensely blue eyes. He let in the clutch with a roar and leapt up the narrow street. Old men and errand boys jumped for safety. The latter looked after the car admiringly. Anthony Marston proceeded on his triumphal progress. Mr. Blur was in the slow train from Plymouth. There was only one other person in his carriage, an elderly seafaring gentleman with a bleary eye. At the present moment he had dropped off to sleep. Mr. Blur was writing carefully in a little notebook. "That's the lot," he muttered to himself. "Emily Brent, Vera Claythorne, Dr. Armstrong, Anthony Marston, old Justice Rollergrave, Philip Lombard, General MacArthur, CMG, DSO, manservant and wife, Mr. and Mrs. Rogers. Soldier Island." He remembered Soldier Island as a boy. Smelly sort of rock covered with gulls, stood about a mile from the coast. It had got its name from a resemblance to the man's head, an American soldier profile. Funny idea to go and build a house on it. Awful in bad weather, but millionaires were full of whims.
Chapter 2. The crowd arrived to the island later that day. "Good afternoon," greeted a man holding the door open for them. "I am Thomas Rogers." "And I am Ethel Rogers," continued a woman from inside. "We are here to ensure you have a great stay." Soon after, the members of the party were settled into their rooms. They were seated for dinner. "This is fantastic," said Vera. "I've always been a fan of tongue." "I don't particularly care for it," replied Emily Brent snobbily. "When will Mr. Owen show up?" asked Mr. Blur to Mr. Rogers, changing the subject. "I received a message that he would be late to arrive. Hopefully he will come later tonight." "How's this Owen like, anyway?" asked Mr. Wargrave. "Well, I don't know. I never met the fellow. My wife and I started working here only a week ago, and Owen hasn't shown up yet." "So you've just been living here?" asked Armstrong. "Yes, he's left directions on what chores to take care of." Chapter 3. Dinner was drawing to a close. The food had been good, the wine perfect. Rogers waited well. Everyone was in better spirits. They had begun to talk to each other with more freedom and intimacy. Mr. Justice Wargrave, mellowed by the excellent port, was being amused in a caustic fashion. Dr. Armstrong and Tony Marston were listening to him. Miss Brent chatted to General MacArthur. They had discovered some mutual friends. Vera Claythorne was asking Mr. Blur intelligent questions about South Africa. Mr. Blur was quite fluent on the subject. Lombard listened to the conversation. Once or twice he looked up quickly, and his eyes narrowed. Now and then his eyes played around the table, studying the others. "Quaint these things are, aren't they?" In the center of the round table, on a circular glass stand, were some little china figures. "Soldiers," said Tony. "Soldier Island, I suppose that's the idea?" Vera leaned forward. "I wonder, how many are there? 10? "Yes, 10 there are," Vera cried. "What fun! They're the 10 little soldier boys of the nursery rhyme, I suppose. In my bedroom, the rhyme is framed and hung over the mantelpiece." Lombard said, "In my room, too." "And mine." "And mine." Everyone joined the chorus. Vera said, "It's an amusing idea, isn't it?" Mr. Justice Wargrave grunted, "Remarkably childish," and helped himself to port. All of a sudden, there was a booming voice that startled everyone. The voice came, without warning, inhuman, penetrating. "Ladies and gentlemen, silence, please!" Everyone was startled. They looked round at each other at the walls. Who was speaking? The voice went on a high, clear voice. "You are charged with the following indictments. Edward George Armstrong, that you did upon the day of 14th day of March, 1925, cause the death of Louisa Mary Kless. Emily Caroline Brent, that upon the 5th of November, 1931, you were responsible for the death of Beatrice Taylor. William Henry Blore, that you brought about the death of James Stephen Landor on October 8th, 1928. Vera Elizabeth Claythorne, that on the 11th day of August, 1935, you killed Cyril Ogilvy Hamilton. Philip Lombard, that upon a date in February 1932, you were guilty of the death of 21 men, members of an East African tribe. John Gordon MacArthur, that on the 4th of January 1917, you deliberately sent your wife's lover, Arthur Richmond, to his death. Anthony James Marston, that upon the 14th day of November last, you were guilty of the murder of Lucy and John Combs. Thomas Roger and Ethel Rogers, that on the 6th of May, 1929, you brought about the death of Jennifer Brady.
Lawrence John Wargrave, that upon the 10th day of June, 1930, you were guilty of the murder of Edward Seaton. Prisoners at the bar, have you anything to say in your defense?" The voice had stopped.
Only Mr. Justice Wargrave and Miss Brent seemed comparatively unmoved. Emily Brent sat upright, her head held high. In both cheeks was a spot of hard color. The judge sat in his habitual pose, his head sunk down into his neck. With one hand he gently scratched his ear. Only his eyes were active, darting round and round the room, puzzled, alert with intelligence. Again, it was Lombard who acted. "That voice! It sounded as though it were in the room!" Vera cried. "Who was it? What was it? It wasn't one of us."
Like the judge, Lombard's eyes wandered slowly around the room. They rested a minute on the open window. Then he shook his head decisively. Suddenly his eyes lightened up. He moved forward swiftly to where a door near the fireplace led into an adjoining room. With a swift gesture, he caught the handle and flung the door open. He passed through and immediately uttered an exclamation of satisfaction. He said, "Ah, here we are." The others crowded after him. Only Miss Brent remained alone, sitting erect in her chair. Inside the second room, a table had been brought up close to the wall, which adjoined the drawing room. On the table was a gramophone, an old-fashioned type with a large trumpet attached. The mouth of the trumpet was against the wall, and Lombard, pushing it aside, indicated where 2 or 3 small holes had been bored through the wall. Adjusting the gramophone, he replaced the needle on the record, and immediately they heard again, "You are charged with the following indictments."
Vera cried, "Turn it off! Turn it off! It's horrible!" "Some heartless practical joke, I suppose," said Armstrong. "I need to calm down," said Marston. "Rogers, is there any brandy in your possession?" "Yes, on the tray, outside of the room." He left, and then soon after, there was a sound of choking. The crowd ran into the room Anthony Marston was in. "He choked on the brandy!" yelled Lombard. The doctor rushed over to feel his pulse. "He's dead." Chapter 4. Dead? Dead? That young Norse god in the prime of his health and strength? Struck down in a moment. Healthy young man didn't die like that, choking over a whiskey and soda. No, they couldn't take it in. Dr. Armstrong was peering into the dead man's face. He sniffed at the blue, twisted lips. Then he picked up the glass from which Anthony Marston had been drinking. "Potassium cyanide," said Dr. Armstrong. "He was poisoned." "Look," said Miss Claythorne. "There are only 9 soldiers on the mantel." Mr. Lombard had a moment of realization. "My God! The poem! It goes, 10 little soldier boys going out to dine. One went and choked himself, and then there were 9. "Are you suggesting that someone killed Marston in terms of what the poem suggests?" asked Miss Brent. "It could very well be," replied Vera, with a tremble in her voice. "Let us all go to bed," said Mr. Rogers. "We must all calm our nerves." Chapter 5. With a start, Dr. Armstrong woke up. It was morning. Sunlight was pouring into the room, and someone was leaning over him, shaking him. It was Rogers. Rogers with a white face, saying, "Doctor! Doctor!" Dr. Armstrong woke up completely. He sat up in bed. He said sharply, "What is it?" "It's the wife, Doctor. I can't get her to wake. My God, I can't get her to wake, and she don't look right to me." Dr. Armstrong was quick and efficient. He wrapped himself in his dressing gown and followed Rogers. He bent over the bed where the woman was lying peacefully on her side. He lifted the cold hand, raised the eyelid. It was some few minutes before he straightened himself and turned from the bed. Rogers whispered, Is she? He passed a tongue over dry lips. Armstrong nodded. "Yes, she's gone." His eyes rested thoughtfully on the man before him. Then they went to the table by the bed, to the washstand, then back to the sleeping woman. Rogers said, Was it her art, Doctor?" "No, I'm afraid it was some toxin. Someone must have poisoned Miss Rogers." Dr. Armstrong broke the news to everyone. "This is preposterous!" cried Lombard. "Another soldier boy is gone," said Vera. "How does the poem go?" asked Mrs. Brent. 9 little soldier boys sat up very late, one overslept himself, and then there were 8. Miss Rogers died in her sleep," cried Mr. Rogers. "We must be very careful about what we consume," said Dr. Armstrong. "I apologize for interrupting, but has anyone seen General MacArthur?" asked Emily Brent. "I don't know," said Lombard. "Did he not get up this morning?" "Yes, I saw him leave earlier today," answered Vera. "I asked where he was going, and he said that he was going to sit by the sea. Now that I think of it, he was acting rather strange. He said he was ready to resign from life and other nonsense. I thought nothing of it. I do hope he is all right." "Oh no," said Blore. "Lombard, come with me. We must search for MacArthur." "Of course." They left the other 5 alone. "Oh my,
There are only 7 soldier boys left on the mantle. I did not even realize one was gone, said Vera. When the 2 men returned, they carried MacArthur back. He's dead, Bloor said with fear in his voice. General MacArthur had been laid on his bed. After making a last examination, Armstrong left the room and came downstairs. He found the others assembled in the drawing room. Miss Brent was knitting. Vera Claythorne was standing by the window, looking out at the hissing rain. Bloor was sitting squarely in a chair, his hands on his knees. Lombard was walking restlessly up and down. At the far end of the room, Mr. Justice Wargrave was sitting in a grandfather chair. His eyes were half closed. They opened as the doctor came into the room. He said in a clear, penetrating voice, "Well, doctor?" Armstrong was very pale. He said, "No question of heart failure or anything like that. MacArthur was hit with a life preserver or some such thing on the back of the head." A little murmur went around, but the clear voice of the judge was raised once more. "Did you find the actual weapon used?" "No." "Nevertheless, you are sure of the facts?" "I'm quite sure." Chapter 6. The party spent the rest of the day rather quietly. They each knew that a killer was among them. "I'm going to bed," exclaimed Miss Claythorne. "This whole situation is too peculiar. 3 people dead." "I agree. I shall go to bed as well," said Emily Brent. "It would be appropriate if all of us went to sleep," said Mr. Rogers. And so they went to bed. There was a chorus of doors locking as they went to sleep. Mr. Bloor woke up the next morning. He checked the clock to find it was 11 o'clock. "Why hasn't the butler arrived with a cup of tea yet?" he thought to himself. He went to find Mr. Lombard. He knocked before he went into his room. "Mr. Lombard, are you awake?" "Well, now I am," he replied groggily. "Have you seen Mr. Rogers? He did not wake up anyone, I don't think." Lombard stared at Bloor for a moment. "Wake everyone up. I will get dressed quickly." The party searched around the island when they couldn't find Rogers in the mansion. They finally found him in a little wash-house chopping wood for the fire. He had an axe through his back. He was dead. A sound of laughter was heard. They turned sharply. Vera Claythorne was standing in the yard. She cried out in a high, shrill voice, shaken with the wild bursts of laughter. "Do they keep bees on this island? Tell me that! Where do we go for honey? Ha ha!" They stared at her uncomprehendingly. It was all as though the sane, well-balanced girl had gone mad before their eyes. She went on in that high, unnatural voice. "Don't stare like that, as though you thought I was mad. It's sane enough what I'm asking. Bees, hives, bees. Oh, you don't understand. Haven't you read the idiotic rhyme? It's up in all your bedrooms, put there for you to study. We might have come here straight away if we'd had sense. 7 little soldier boys chopping up sticks, and the next verse. I know the whole thing by heart, I tell you. 6 little soldier boys playing with a hive, and that's why I'm asking you. Do they keep bees on this island? Isn't it funny? Isn't it damned funny?" She began laughing wildly again. Dr. Armstrong strode forward. He raised his hand and struck her a flat blow on the cheek. She gasped, hiccuped, and swallowed. She stood motionless a minute, and then she said, "Thank you. I'm all right now." Chapter 7. There were only 6 of them left. "I suspect it was Miss Brent," Vera Claythorne whispered to the other 3. "She's the only one of us that doesn't seem to be troubled. After Roger's dying, she is calmly knitting away in the room over." "It seems absolutely possible," said Wargrave. "We must interrogate her." Bloor and Lombard agreed. "Miss Brent," Lombard yelled as the 4 of them walked into the room, "we must ask you a few questions about the deaths that have occurred and—" He stopped talking. Emily Brent was hunched over with a syringe stuck in her neck. "My God!" exclaimed Mr. Bloor. "She's dead!" "Doctor, did you bring a syringe to this island?" "Why, of course, but only for medical purposes. I haven't touched it since we arrived." "Is this your syringe?" Wargrave said, pulling it out of Brent's neck. "It can't be. No, somebody must have taken it out of my bag." "Fair enough. There is only one option we have. We must take all of our dangerous items out of our bags and lock them up." Chapter 8. After that action was complete, the 5 were very careful around each other. They went to bed. Then there was a big ruckus. Everyone rushed downstairs to find Justice Wargrave covered with a shower curtain. Vera was shocked. "Is he—" "Yes, he's dead," said Bloor after checking his pulse. "Who killed him? That's the question." "It must have been Armstrong. He's not here," exclaimed Lombard. "Miss Claythorne, let us search for him. Bloor should stay here and bring Wargrave to his bed." The two searched the entire island, failing to find Armstrong. "It's incredible. He's nowhere to be found," said Lombard. "Wait, let's think to the poem. What does it say again?" he asked. "Let me think. 4 little soldier boys going out to sea.
A red herring swallowed one, and then there were 3. Well, that's just it. It's a red herring. This death is trying to throw us off. But what does it mean? I don't know. Philip Lombard looked out into the ocean and then said, "We should head back." I know, but it's scary in there. I want to stay outside for a while. It seems like there can be no harm done to anybody out here. I suppose we can stay out here for a little while longer. They walked by the shore for a while until they stumbled across an unknown object. What is that? Vera asked Lombard. Oh, it's probably only a pile of seaweed. No, it's something else. A pile of clothes, or... Vera gasped. It's Armstrong. He's dead, said Lombard. Well, we found him. We need to bring him back. Yes, said Vera nervously. Of course. Chapter 9. When they came back, they found Blore collapsed. There was a cement clock shaped like a bear cracked on his head. The clock shaped like a bear, said Vera. 10 little soldier boys walking in the zoo. A big bear hugged one, and then there were 2. We're the only ones left, said Lombard. You killed everyone. Of course not. Don't be stupid, Vera. I surely didn't kill anyone, and you're the only other one left on this island. He pulled his revolver out of his pocket and pointed it at Vera. It was nice knowing you, Miss Claythorne. Vera Claythorne pulled his arm down and kicked him in the stomach. She grabbed the revolver out of his hand and pointed it at him. Without hesitation, she shot him in the chest 3 times. Philip Lombard lay on the ground, dead. Finally, she felt safe. Vera walked around the house. She did not realize how tired she was until she walked past the door in her room. She went inside to find a noose and a chair. She finally understood what General MacArthur meant when he talked about his being ready to die. Her life was a success. She felt like her time was done. She stepped on the chair. Vera Claythorne gently lay her head through the noose and kicked the chair away. And then there were none.